It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. Peru's president, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, offered his resignation on Wednesday. The announcement comes in the wake of a growing corruption scandal involving not only the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht, but also efforts to bribe legislators of Peru's parliament to vote against Kuczynski's impeachment. Let's listen to a bit of his resignation on Tuesday.
I don't want to be an obstacle for our nation as it finds the path to unity and harmony that it needs so much.
The scandal took a new turn this week when secretly recorded videos surfaced that showed legislators talking about receiving bribes in exchange for their support for Kuczynski in an impeachment vote. Prosecutors have now said that even if Kuczynski is no longer president, he should still be prosecuted for corruption. The scandal now casts a shadow over the Summit of the Americas that is expected to take place in Lima, Peru in April. Joining me now to analyze the situation in Peru is Gerardo Renique. Gerardo is originally from Peru and is professor of history at the City College of New York. Thanks for joining us, Gerardo.
Hi, how you doing?
Now, Gerardo, the scandal involving former President Kuczynski have taken several complicated turns. Let's take it step by step here. First, what was he accused of regarding the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht? And it's a company that had already taken down a number of politicians throughout Latin America, from Brazil to Ecuador and beyond. What was the Peruvian allegation specifically?
Okay, Odebrecht is one of the largest construction companies in Peru, as is in many other parts of Latin America. Odebrecht has been involved, at least in the last 20-something years, in the development of the largest, infrastructural projects. From oil ducts to highways to the Trans-Amazonic highway, and in several major irrigation projects. During the presidency of Toledo, Alejandro Toledo, Kuczynski was the Minister of the Economy. And as such, he also had at the same time a consulting company. And this consulting company was offering, services to Odebrecht at the moment that Odebrecht was bidding for the development of one of these major construction companies. So that problem came up in December, in mid-December, and that led to a first opening of an impeachment process to President Kuczynski. Later on, we find out, as you mentioned before, the Odebrecht case is a big scandal that involves, centered in Brazil, involves several countries in Latin America. There's a process going on against Odebrecht in Brazil, the Lava Jato case, the Clean the House case. And one of the persons that is involved in giving declaration is the former top executive of Odebrecht in Peru, Jorge Barata. So Jorge Barata, and let me give you the exact date, on December 21st, Barata gave a new declarations. I'm sorry, this was in early January. Barata gave a number of declarations implicating not only Kuczynski having received money from Odebrecht for his electoral campaign, but several other politicians, from Alejandro Toledo to Alan Garcia, they were the previous presidents of Peru, to Humala. All of them have received, and Keiko Fujimori has received money from the Odebrecht company.
Now, Gerardo, from what I understand, Kuczynski's already was facing an impeachment last December, but narrowly escaped it because members of the former President Fujimori's party voted in his favor. That is right. Kuczynski's favor. He then turned around and pardoned former President Alberto Fujimori, who was serving a 25-year prison sentence. So it certainly looked like a quid pro quo kind of situation already. Now, how was this perceived in Peru, and what did it mean for Kuczynski? So, popularity, even if he had managed to bribe and win that impeachment vote, would he have withstood the popular will of the people to continue to serve as president?
Actually, together with the Odebrecht corruption scandal, the pardon of Fujimori was the other big issue unleashing, the crisis of Kuczynski. In order to not to be impeached, he managed to obtain the vote of 10 of the congressmen, the Fujimorista congressmen. And those are the 10 congressmen that are followers of Kenji Fujimori. Kenji Fujimori is the brother of Keiko Fujimori, and between these two siblings, there's a tremendous political rivalry, for being the inheritor of the legacy of their father, Alberto Fujimori. The response to the pardon of Fujimori was overwhelming. In the last 20 years, Peru haven't seen demonstrations on the scale of the demonstrations, and mass assemblies that follow the pardon of Fujimori. So that further erode the really weak government of Fujimori of Kuczynski. When Kuczynski takes office, he barely has 19 representatives in Congress. And Keiko Fujimori controlled the majority of the Congress with 73 seats. So this further erodes not only the administration of Kuczynski, but also erodes, an already, political system that wasn't seen with good eyes by the majority of the population. And just to give you an example, this is I'm in front here of a poll that was taken 2 days before this latest scandal of the videos came out. The rate of approval of Congress is 11%, and the majority of Peruvians, were asking, were of the idea that the president and everybody, all the cabinet and all the Congress would have to resign and new elections have to be called. So that's, to give you an idea of what's going on in Peru. And today, this afternoon, the Congress again is going to reopen a debate if they're going to accept or not the resignation of Kuczynski. And on the other hand, labor organizations, human rights groups, and the relatives of the people that were disappeared by Fujimori are calling to a large demonstration this afternoon in Lima and in different cities in the country.
All right, Gerardo, explain or at least describe what exactly took place in these secret videos that led to the offering of the resignation that you described will be voted on today.
Okay, they are, and again, to put it very simply, here you have a congressman that is part of the group of Keiko Fujimori, offering to the representatives of President Kuczynski in Congress his vote to favor the impeachment that was supposed to be voted today, right? So in this meeting, we have on one side of the table, we have this representative, Mamani, that he comes from the southern part of the country. And on the other side of the table, negotiating on behalf of the government, are the lawyer of President Kuczynski, 2 congressmen that at the same time occupy positions in Kuczynski government, and Kenji Fujimori, trying to convince this Mamani, offering him money, offering him development project for his region in exchange for his vote, rejecting the impeachment that was going to be voted today. So all these things are set up. The thing was set up by Keiko Fujimori, and this Mamani congressman that it's in the videos, and it's the one that they were trying to buy their vote. He's already implicated in corruption cases in the regional government of Puno, the region that he represents in Congress. Keiko Fujimori is under indictment for having taken money from Odebrecht. So all this is a big farce. And there's a tremendous cynicism on the political elite becomes very evident with this thing, with this case. So as you can understand, this has created a tremendous anger and rejection of the government. But on the other hand, there's no viable alternative to this, and it has put at the moment the political elite in disarray. And despite the fact that they're going to be in disarray, though, Keiko Fujimori would still have the control of Congress. So it's a very complicated, political situation.
Right. So then what happens? Let's say this afternoon they accept the resignation of Kuczynski, and then what happens? Does the vice president take over?
The vice president is going to be, swear in on Friday. The vice president is going to take, the position of Kuczynski, but Congress is going to vote if they accept the impeachment, or if they, if they accept the resignation, or if they're going to impeach Kuczynski. There's a very similar situation to what happened with President Alberto Fujimori. Alberto Fujimori sent his in the year 2000, after a wave of popular mobilizations. He went away to he was on a official state visit in Asia, and he sent his resignation by fax. Congress didn't accept his resignation, and he was kicked out of office. So it's very likely that President Kuczynski will be kicked out of office. I doubt the Congress is going to accept the resignation. I'm sure he's going to be immediately indicted. The courts already have put restrictions for President Kuczynski, to leave the country. And on the other hand, the congressmen that were involved in the buying of the vote, to favor to reject the impeachment, are going to be kicked out of Congress. And that's going to be favored because they're going to be replaced they're going to be substituted by people that are more favorable to Keiko Fujimori. So what we've seen is that what opens now is a very uncertain, moment, that it will pretty much depend, I think, of the level of demonstrations in the street and the willingness or not of the Vice President Vizcarra, that will be the president starting tomorrow, to tend bridges to one or other side of the political opposition. Is he going to lean towards Keiko Fujimori, that Keiko Fujimori sort of have the government of Kuczynski captured by the majority that she has in Congress, or President Vizcarra would try to approach the political opposition and the popular movement. Let me just, to remind to your listeners that the left in Peru, it's the second force in Congress. They have 20 representatives, although the left is also divided in two. It's divided in two parts. One fraction with 10 votes, the other fraction with 10 votes. Both of them, both of these fractions are in favor of the impeachment. So it's a very unclear, situation, extremely fluid. The left. I think that the challenge is now to the left. The left sort of have been lagging behind, this problem that has been a problem between these two different factions, these two different sectors of the right. And the right is going to come out very, weakened for this, but with the political control of Congress. So it's the situation is really very extremely uncertain.
And finally, Gerardo, what happens to the Summit of the Americas? The two main topics on the agenda, ironically, is corruption and Venezuela. And given that the crisis in Peru and the general disdain in Latin America for President Trump, what will happen at the Summit of the Americas?
That's also extremely uncertain because I've already was reading the newspapers that President Macri has decided if Kuczynski is not the president of Peru, I'm not going to attend the meeting. So I think that the fate of this is pretty uncertain. The latest that I heard was that what I told you about Macri, and that Macri have got in contact with the president of Colombia. It seems that the president of Colombia would not attend the summit. So more likely, if I would be President Vizcarra, I really would know what to do under the circumstances, because, this can, a weak government, that calls a summit that is dedicated to the issue of corruption after this big corruption scandal is sort of extremely contradictory. And on the other hand, more likely is that the summit is going to be received by massive, demonstrations. So I don't know. If I would be Vizcarra, I would, suspend the summit. So, and again, this is uncertain. I think that between today, the debate starts this afternoon at 4, and by tomorrow noon, we're going to have a clear idea of what is going to happen, what is going to be the position of the new president, Vizcarra. His announcement, I'm sure, is going to be tomorrow at some time at around noon, because he's taking office at noon. So he should be issuing some sort of speech or something that I'm sure he'll address this issue of the Summit of the Americas. But at this moment, it's uncertain.
All right, Gerardo, it looks like we'll be coming back to you very soon again. I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.